Hello everyone. In this video, I want to talk about ego. Now, everyone has heard already the word ego. Probably most people don't know what it actually means. It's a word that is abused, that is used like all the time with many different meanings, and it's actually very unclear what ego is. So I will give my definition and then we will see what we can do around this definition. So I'm trying to give a practical definition. So I'm not trying to give the definition. There is no such thing as the definition. There are only practical definitions. So we define it in a way that is practical for the purpose of what we want to achieve. So ego is related to identity. Identity is basically what we feel that we are. So identity doesn't have to be something real. Actually, most of the time is not. It's really our definition of what we are, is what we feel that we are. It's actually extremely difficult to understand what we are, what we actually are. Many philosophers and spiritual guru, etc. have tried, but really no one can actually pinpoint what we are. So people come up with theory, or there is the negative approach, which says you are not this, you're not this, you're not this, you're not this, but then it doesn't say what you are. Let's say the actual identity is a very complex issue, and as I said, many people have tried to define what we are, and it's extremely difficult, and for sure it's extremely difficult to reach a conclusion. So it can be an interesting path to pursue, it can be a very interesting topic to discuss about, something to think about, but it's very difficult to reach a conclusion. And here in this video I want to stick to practical things. So we are not going to dig into what we are or what we actually are or the essence or whatever stuff like this. No, we are only going to look at ego from a practical perspective. So ego is basically what we think we are. So it's a word, at least in my opinion, but I will give you kind of a series of elements so that you can, let's say, improve your life based on what I'm explaining. So let's just stick to this definition. So ego is what we think we are. It's what we feel we are. It's not about reality. It's really about feeling. So it's about what we feel that we are, because there is no reality here. So it's like, what is our identity? Realistically speaking, our identity is what we feel it is. There is another thing that is interesting. I will just give it as a parenthesis because it can be interesting for some people. What is being or existing? What is existing? I mean, it's extremely hard to define. What does it mean, I exist or I am? It's extremely difficult to explain or even to think about it. It's a very complex topic. So the thing is, if we want, we can reduce it to something else. We can say that actually the idea of I exist is really the same as I feel I exist. So if you think about it, you exist because you feel that you exist. So ultimately, there is no difference between existing and feeling that you exist. You exist because you feel something. If you didn't feel anything, you would not exist. And the first thing you feel is that you exist. So, but the fact that you feel that you exist is in some way the same as you exist. There is no difference between I feel that I exist and I exist. So in reality, we exist because we feel that we exist. It's really the same. So what ensures us that we exist is the feeling that we exist. We couldn't feel that we exist if we did not exist. I mean, if we feel that we exist, then of course we must exist to feel that we exist. I will argue that there is no difference between feeling that we exist and existing. We exist because we feel that we exist. And I will argue that this is maybe the true identity. The true identity is really the feeling that we exist, nothing else. So it's kind of this core element of feeling. It's a little bit like the cogito ergo sum. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correctly, but the idea which says, I think, therefore I am. But it's a little bit different because the cogito, which says, I think, therefore I am, effectively is implying that there must be some thinking and that the thinking belongs to you. But I think it's not completely accurate. So it's more like, I feel that I exist, therefore I exist. Because we don't know if the thought is truly ours. So in some way, it's just a theory. I mean, I'm just explaining stuff. It doesn't have to be real. I'm just speculating, yeah? So it's just like when I look at something, it doesn't mean that what I'm seeing is, in quotes, mine. In the same way, I can imagine that I'm seeing something external. I don't like the use of the distinction internal, external, it's because it's arbitrary. But for the sake of this example, let's use it. So I look at something, let's say I look at a cat, and that cat is external to me. I don't think I am that cat because I see that cat. So in some way, we could argue that, or in a dream, it's like we dream stuff that doesn't exist. But the point is, it's not because I think that I can say that this thought really ultimately belongs to my identity. It could just be some perception. So the thought may be a perception. I may be just feeling thoughts. I may be just perceiving thoughts. It doesn't mean that I'm actually generating the thought. I'm making a lot of inaccurate statements in this video. This is just a super introductory video. If anyone is interested in more in-depth stuff, you can watch the series about spiritual enlightenment, where I go really, really deep. But here we stick to ego and simplified approach. So the thing is, instead of using the cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, we change it a little bit to this idea of I feel, therefore I am, but even more specifically, I feel that I exist, therefore I exist. This is kind of a safe assumption to make, yeah? Because you can understand that there is no way that you feel that you could not feel that you exist if you did not exist. So the fact that you feel that you exist is a guarantee that you exist, because there is no way you could feel that you exist if you did not exist. If there is an ultimate identity, and of course we are being very generic, if there is an ultimate identity, it is just the existence. But existence of what? Existence of the feeling of existing. So the core, the absolute core that cannot be reduced, so it's the fundamental force, the core force that cannot be reduced more, is the idea that I exist because I feel that I exist. The fact that I feel that I exist guarantees to me that I exist, because there is no way that I could feel that I exist if I did not exist. So I feel that I exist, and it's true. This is very important. So this is the core element. I feel that I exist, and I know it to be true, because I can also feel things that are not true. For example, let's say, someone could smoke some weed and feel that they are flying, but they are not flying. So it doesn't mean that because you feel something that is true. So you have to feel it, you have to experience it, but it also has to be consistent, to be logical. It cannot contradict itself. So if, for example, you smoke weed and you feel that you're flying, but then you look around you and you're just on your chair and you're in your apartment and nothing is moving, it's a huge contradiction. Obviously, you're not flying. You're just feeling that you're flying. You can feel a lot of things that are not real. But in this case, if you feel that you exist, so it's a feeling. So you're experiencing existing. So you experience the feeling of existing, but you also know logically that there is no way to experience the feeling of existing unless you exist. Because if you didn't exist, you couldn't experience anything. So you could not experience the feeling of existence. So this is our base assumption. This is the core, the thing that cannot be reduced more. I feel that I exist, and I know it's true, because if I did not exist, I couldn't feel that I exist. I know it seems a little bit complicated, but it's not. It's just, I feel that I exist, and I know it's true. This is our base assumption. So this is, in some way, our true identity. It's kind of the core of the core of the core. It's the pure essence of our identity. So now, what is ego? So ego will be like another identity, like a false identity. I'm not even sure what is the root of the word ego, but maybe it's related to this idea of alter ego. I'm not sure. So like the other identity, like the alternative. So there is the true identity, let's say, our essence, the fact that we exist, the thing that cannot be removed, because if you remove the fact that you exist, then you don't exist, so there is nothing else. So that's the thing you cannot remove. But the other things you can remove. Let's take, for example, the easiest example of ego, of identity. So most people will associate identity with memory. So I am Giotto, I'm born on this day, I'm born in this city, and this is my job, and I live in this city, and blah, 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 blah. Those are memories. Usually, We associate identity with memory. This is kind of the core. Identity equal memory. Status, wealth, health status, like what you know, who are your friends, who are your enemies, whatever. So it's like usually we tend to associate identity with memory. That is, we imagine that without memory there is no identity. But it's not true, because we are confusing, let's say, consciousness or perception or the ability to feel with identity. It's not the same. And I give an example. So if tomorrow you fall on the ground and you hit your head and you have a total amnesia, you forgot absolutely everything, is it still you? I mean, you're not dead. So you fall, you hit your head, you forget absolutely everything, your name, you don't remember anything. You cannot even speak. You even forgot how to speak. Is it still you? You are still going to feel. There is a continuity of feeling. There is a continuity, we can say, of consciousness. So you're not dead. So there is continuity. So it's you before, there is feeling, you can feel, you are conscious, let's say. You lose your memory here, there is continuity. But without memory, your memory is gone, but you are still going to feel. It's still you in some way. You still exist. You're still feeling. You're still feeling that you exist. But you're feeling many more things. You're feeling that it's hot, it's cold, you're hungry, you're not hungry, you're tired, whatever. You will still feel. So it's still you. Memory is not identity. Because if you lose memory, it's still you. But you don't remember anything, but it's still you. You still feel. There is not continuity of memory, because you can lose your memory. If you fall and you hit your head and you have amnesia, you lose your memory. So there is no continuity of memory. So maybe someone could say there is no continuity of identity, but it's still you, because you are still feeling. So it's still you. So we shouldn't confuse consciousness or feeling with memory and identity. Those are two different things. So it's still you. You are still feeling. So ego, we are going to define it as whatever we feel or we believe is our identity. So true identity is existence, the fact that we feel that we exist. It has no qualities, it has no details, there is no information in it. You see, there are no details. It's just, I feel that I exist. This is ultimately my essential identity, because it's the thing that if I remove it, there is nothing left. So this is the essence. Essence in the sense that the thing that if you remove, you lose the thing. So the thing that you cannot remove, or everything is gone. You cannot remove existence out of yourself, so it's your ultimate identity. Then we have other things that we believe are identity, but it's not true. So I just gave the example of memory. We believe that memory is our identity, but it's not, because you see that you can't remove it and you still exist. Ego, I'm going to say, and it's maybe oversimplified, but I think it's practical in the context of this video. Ego is the imagined identity, is what I think I am. So what I ultimately am is the fact that I feel that I exist, is existence itself, the ultimate essential identity. And everything else that I think I am is ego. So in some way, my memory is a form of ego. Of course, there are maybe different degrees of ego. But the ego would be what we feel we are, what we think we are, but it's like extra. It's not necessary. It's like, it's stuff that you think you are this thing, but you can safely remove it and it's still you. You in the sense that there is still this continuity of feeling, because if you hit your head and you lose your memory, yeah, you don't remember who you are. But if someone hit you on the foot with a hammer, it's still you that feel the pain. It's not somebody else. So there is this continuity of feeling. There is this continuity of consciousness, whatever we want to call it. So if you lose your memory, it's still you. It's not somebody else. Whatever you're going to feel, it's still you feeling it and not somebody else. So this is the true identity, this continuity of feeling. This continuity of feeling that you exist, but also other stuff. Continuity of feeling. Everything else can be removed. So memory can be removed. So what is ego usually? I mean, let's say from a practical perspective, what is it for the average person, and why people want to remove it? This is also an important question. Why people want to remove ego? I mean, what's so wrong about ego? Why do we want to remove ego? So ego, I will argue, in its most common form, is basically stories. Stories we tell ourselves about our identity. So over time, maybe because of our parents, society, the media, but also about ourselves, we come up with stories about what we are, what we should be, stories about our identity. So, for example, someone could believe that he's a good person. So, I'm a good person, or I'm generous, or I'm successful, or I'm smart, or I'm better than everyone else. It's ego, it's usually stories that we use to define our identity. So, we define our identity with stories that kind of distinguish, separate us from other people. So I'm smart, they are dumb. I'm rich, they are poor. I'm good, they are bad. We come up usually with those stories. And the thing is, then we get really attached to those stories because we feel that those stories are us. So let's make an example. Let's say that, for example, someone has a lot of money. Let's say he has earned it through whatever. He has earned lots of money in his life. And now he's going to build lots of story that, well, probably he has good karma. Probably he's a smart guy. He works hard. He's not lazy. He's careful. He's successful. He's the best. And then one day he loses money. Now, how is he going to feel? Of course he's going to feel bad. Because everyone that loses their money, they are going to feel bad. This is normal. It's like losing money is painful. Everyone is going to feel bad if they lose money. But then someone that has associated, that gives extra meaning to this money will suffer more. It's not just about the pain of the loss of the money. It's about the meanings, the stories that he had attached to this money. His successful identity, he is successful as in identity because he has money. He's smart because he has money. He's better than others because he has money. Ultimately, it's about being special. So ego is really about this idea that I'm special and other people are not. And I can pick whatever way I want to be special. I could be special because I am more generous. I could be even special because, let's say, I'm more poor and I chose poverty. I chose renunciation. I choose to live a life of renunciation. So that makes me better. I am more holy. I am more saint, like a saint. I'm more spiritual because I gave away everything and now I'm better than everyone else. Those are the stories. So we really over time create those stories about who we are, about our identity. And then we get attached to those stories. They really become what we think we are. So we think we are those stories. So if I keep telling myself that I'm smart because I made lots of money, for example, I may end up believing it, first of all. I may believe it's my actual identity. But then if I lose that money, I may suffer a lot because now it's not just about the money itself, which of course it will give a lot of pain to anybody to lose all their money. But now I've associated some extra meaning to it. And this money signifies, represent the fact that I'm smart and successful, I'm special, I have good karma, God loves me, and blah, 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 blah. So what if I lose all my money? That means I'm stupid, I have bad karma, and God hates me? Well, if I believe that, if I made up the story that the reason I have this money is because I'm smart, and I have good karma, and God loves me, clearly if I lose the money, it has to mean the opposite. It has to mean that I'm stupid, and I have bad karma, and God hates me. Of course, it's oversimplified, but it's just to give the example. So ego is simple. I'm not trying to use a complicated word like ego, it's some mysterious thing. No. I'm giving very simple, practical definitions so we can use them in this video itself. Identity, as in real identity, what we actually are is the feeling that we exist and that we know that it's true. The ego is the stories we make about our identity. Identity stories. We build generic stories like Santa Claus or whatever. You can watch the Spiritual Enlightenment video if you want, where I go into many of those stories. So they are generic stories, and they are stories about identity. For example, generic stories could be stories about justice or the idea of deserving. So those are generic stories. But then we have identity stories, stories connected to identity, and those I call them ego. So ego will be the stories about our identity. And this is the false identity. So it's like, it's just stories. I mean, we ourselves build stories about what our identity is. So there is what our identity actually is, the feeling that we exist, and nothing else. That's the essence that you cannot remove, because if you remove, then you don't exist, so there is nothing left. And then everything else is extra. And so we add this extra. but we believe it is truly us. So we believe this ego is our essence. We believe that those stories we tell about ourselves are the essence of our identity. So we believe that basically if we lose those stories, if someone or something can break those stories, then it's almost like dying. So if, let's say, you believe that you're special and unique and smart and lucky because you're rich and then you lose all your money, not only you suffer because you lose the money, but you also lose yourself because you feel that you lost your identity. But of course, it was a fake identity. It's not really your identity. But in your mind, it's your identity. So you really feel you have lost yourself because you have attached so much meaning to this thing. You have attached so much significance to the fact that this money gives you all those qualities. This money creates all those stories about your identity, about who you are. So it starts to give you a huge, huge ego. And now, what is the problem with the ego? Because again, why would we need to remove the ego? Can't we just keep this ego? Can't we just keep it? Of course, there is no obligation to get rid of the ego. I mean, someone may just decide to keep it. But usually a lot of people, they kind of feel instinctively that something is wrong with the ego, that their life would be much better if they can remove it. And I will explain you why it is correct. The intuition is correct. And the ego is something that is much better to remove. Because those stories, there are two issues with those stories about identity. The first issue is that if specific events happen, then the suffering is much more. So if I have lots of money and I lose my money, it's painful, but that's it. It's just painful. So we can make this distinction between pain and suffering. So pain is just pain. It's direct. It hits you. Direct pain. Suffering is more the mental suffering that is around it. So let's say I lose all my money, pain. I'm an idiot. I'm a failure. God hates me. That's suffering. The stories we build in our head after the event itself. So pain you cannot avoid. It's like you break your leg, pain. Suffering is, oh my God, what I'm going to do now with my leg, without my leg, blah, 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 blah. So the suffering is more mental and the pain is more direct. But it doesn't mean it has to be physical. So losing your money is still pain. But the stories you build around it, like especially about how it changed your identity. So you thought you were successful, now you feel you're a failure. This is not directly related to losing the money. It's a story you tell yourself. It's an ego thing. So the ego massively amplify certain painful events. So let's say losing your money, instead of just being painful and that's it, it's going to still be painful, but there is going to be plenty of mental suffering because it will basically attack, it will hurt the idea that you have built of who you are. Now you're going to feel like I'm a failure, I'm terrible, I'm stupid, God hates me. So it's much, much worse. So this is the first thing, is that the ego, when certain event happens, then it's going to touch your ego, it's going to hurt your ego because you have those stories about you are good, you are smart, you are special because you have money, but you lose the money, then you lose, not only you lose the money, but you lose the feeling, the story, the idea that you're special. So now you're not special, now you're like everybody else. And so you're going to suffer a lot more. So that's the first reason for trying to remove the ego. The second reason is that it takes effort to constantly defend it. So it's like, imagine that, for example, you tell yourself a story. So basically your ego in your ego, your ego is like a database. So it's a list of stories. So it's like in your ego, there is the story that you are generous. Someone that you don't really like asks you for a favor and you really don't want to do it. But because you have to keep defending that story that you're generous, you may feel forced to do it. Or maybe someone say, you really think you are generous. It's a big deal for you because it makes you feel special. Yeah, I'm a very generous guy. And someone say, you're not generous. And now you have to argue, no, I'm generous because I did this. And you will try to do more generous stuff and whatever. And it has nothing to do with actual generosity. You're just trying to defend your ego. You're just building stories to feel good for yourself. It's not about generosity at all, because generosity is about truly wanting to help the other person. But here you don't care about helping the other person. You just want to validate your story that you are generous so that you feel good for your ego. So the problem with the ego is that it takes a lot of effort to constantly try to validate the ego by doing certain action to validate those stories and constantly defend those stories when you feel that other people are attacking those stories. The question is, why do you need those stories? Why do you need this ego? Why do you need those stories about your identity to make you feel special? I mean, why do you need to be special? What's the point? Why is it so important to be special? Isn't it enough that you exist? You exist and you feel that you exist, and everything else is extra. Everything else you can argue is part of an experience. Just like if you were watching a movie. So you could imagine in this metaphor that you are the spectator, the person sitting, the viewer. You are the person sitting on the couch watching the movie, and everyone is watching a different movie. But it's not you think you are more special because you're watching a certain movie compared to someone else. It's like there is you, as in the feeling that you exist and the fact that you know it's true. And it's a big, big deal to exist. The difference between existing and non-existing is just like the difference between 0 and any number. Even if the number is 0.1, basically 0 is 0, it's absolutely nothing. And anything that is not 0, the difference between 0 and any number that is not 0, no matter how small it is infinite. The difference between 0 and a million is infinite in terms of multiplication, yeah? Going from 0 to a million is infinite increase. Going from 0 to 1 is also infinite increase. Going from 0 to 0.001 is also infinite increase. So really, existing is a huge deal because it's infinitely better than not existing. So why do you need to add those little extra, like I'm smart, I'm special, I'm successful? Those are just stories. It's just a massive burden for you. So it's just making your life miserable, because every time something painful happens, instead of just feeling the pain for a while and then the pain goes away, the pain is amplified massively. It becomes suffering, and then it sticks with you for a long time, because the suffering can stay in your mind for a lot more than the pain will have. So someone punch you, for example, you may feel pain for 5 minutes and then it's gone. But then you will think about the humiliation of this punch for maybe 5 years. So the suffering is much worse than the pain. But the suffering requires the ego. Because now what was humiliated? This story of yourself that you are a guy that has to be respected and respect is important, and if someone punches you, it's a humiliation and blah, 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 blah. But do you really need that? I mean, if someone punches you, effectively, it's just that someone has punched you, and that's not great. I mean, yeah, sure, I would rather that someone does not punch me than someone punch me, but is it such a big deal? Someone punched me, I mean, maybe I will punch him back, or maybe not. Maybe I will press charges with the police. Sure, I will feel the pain for maybe 1 hour. I don't know how strong the punch is. I will feel the pain for a few hours, and then that's it. But if I have those stories about my ego, who I am, who I should be, and it's important to be this, it's important to be that, blah, 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 then this suffering of that punch may last for years. So do I really need this ego? Do I really need to spend my time to do things I don't actually want to do? So instead of being able to follow my heart, to follow the things I truly want, the things that truly give me joy, I'm obsessed with constantly trying to do stuff to validate my ego stories. So I want to ensure that everyone believes I'm generous. I want to ensure everyone believes I'm rich. And by the way, it's very costly to look rich. So I have to waste money in stupid things, expensive things, just to look rich. And then I may actually end up losing all my money just to look rich, because it's important for my ego to look rich. And people look up at me and think I'm special, I'm better than them, blah, 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 blah. The thing is, do I really need this ego? Is it really so important for me? Is it really making my life better to be forced to do a lot of actions to validate those stories, to spend a lot of time to defend those stories in front of others? If someone says, you're not that rich, so you have to buy a Ferrari. You're not that generous, so you have to lend him lots of money. You're not that nice, I have to do something, I don't know, stupid just to look nice. But why would I spend my time defending those ego stories, those stories about identity, which are just stories that I made up? Why would I spend my time to defend those stories? It doesn't make sense. Why would I do a lot of effort just to validate those stories? Why would I want to experience massive suffering instead of just a little bit of pain when something goes wrong? Because pain is easy, everyone experiences it. It's painful for a while and then it's gone. But suffering is because you give a meaning to the thing that happened. So you lose the money, it's painful. But if you give a meaning to this money, like you are special because you have this money, well, then if you lose this money, you're not special anymore. You lose your identity and you may suffer for a very, very, very long time. So let's be practical, since that's what I promised in the beginning of the video. So how do you identify those stories? Because first of all, the key to removing those ego stories is to become aware of them. You don't really need to do any effort. You just have to become aware, because those stories are unconscious. They're like assumptions that you have in your mind. And all you have to do is to make them conscious. Once you realize them, that it's a story and what the story is and maybe why you have the story, once it becomes conscious, it's usually gone. It loses its power. So it has power because it's unconscious and it's unknown to you. But as soon as it becomes conscious and you realize it, it loses all its power. So the key to do this is through introspection. It's basically looking inside yourself and identifying those stories that you tell yourself about identity. So how do you do it? The secret keyword is why. So you ask yourself the question why. So for example, you say, it's important to be respected. Why? It's important to be successful. Why? I need to be generous. Why? I need to be more this. Why? I need to be more that. Why? I'm not this enough. Why? Every time you feel that you have to do something, you ask the question why. And you try to understand what is the reason for it. Why do you have to be successful? Why do you have to be rich? Why do you have to be better than others? Why do you have to be more spiritual? Why do you have to be more generous? Why do you have to be more nice? Or why do you have to be more harsh? Why do you have to be more good? Why do you have to be more bad? Why? What is the reason? And when you find the reason, then you realize that that thing has nothing to do with you. Because really, if you can find a reason, that means it's not you. You ultimately is your existence and the feeling of existing. The rest is like decoration. It's like in the metaphor I gave before. You are the viewer that is watching a movie. You're the person watching the movie, and everything else is the movie. So your existence is just the watcher of the movie, and the movie is everything else. Let's say someone is watching a movie about a very successful guy, and another person is watching a movie about a beggar. Does that change what the viewer is? Does the kind of movie the viewer is watching defines what the viewer is? Of course not. The viewer could watch any movie. So we are our existence. We are the fact that we feel that we exist and we know it's true. And everything else we can argue it's experience. It's like the movie. So why do we have to feel that we are also the movie? Basically, that's what ego would be. It's like getting pieces of the movie and believing we are those pieces of the movie, identifying completely with the character of the movie. So he's rich and successful. Oh, that's great. He's a beggar on the street. Oh, that's horrible. But maybe the movie with the beggar is very interesting. And the movie with the rich guy is boring. It's not that you only want to watch a movie about very successful guys doing great things. Maybe that's super boring. You want to see many things in the movie. But you don't associate with the movie. You don't think you are the character. You are the viewer. So our true identity is our existence, because it's the thing that we cannot remove. If we remove, there is nothing else. So of course we are this. But everything else is extra. It's a story we create. But those stories are heavy because we confuse those stories with our identity. This is the problem of the ego, is that we confuse. So if someone attacks our ego, we feel pain, we feel suffering, we feel we are being attacked. If I tell myself the story that I'm generous, and that makes me special, and someone say I am not generous, oh my God, it's like, he's attacking me, he's attacking my identity, he's saying I'm not generous. I have to prove to him that I'm generous by maybe throwing away lots of money, which I don't want to, but I will still do it to protect my identity, my fake identity. But what if I don't think I have to be generous? I can just be whatever I want to be. If someone say I'm not generous, I say, so what? I'm not successful, so what? I'm not smart, so what? Who cares? Why would I care? So the point is, it's very important when we feel hurt, when we feel attacked, when we feel suffering, we feel pain, when we feel we have to do something, we have to prove something to ourselves, to someone else, etc., to ask the question why. The question why is the beginning of the introspection process, to look inside ourselves about why we feel we have to do it. And if there is a reason, usually we will find a reason, and maybe a reason to the reason, and we can find a long chain of reasons, and we keep digging. And then eventually we realize that there is a reason. Maybe when we were young, our dad told us that success is very important and blah, blah, blah. So, It's just that. It's just that when I was a kid, my dad told me that success is very important. It's not me, it's a story that someone told me. If you can't find an answer to the why, then clearly it's not you. You understand? Because it's the cause. The reason there is this story is not you, it's the story that caused it. So if you can find a cause when you ask the question why, then it means the story is not you. The story is the result of that cause. So the exercise to remove the ego is really just an exercise of introspection. It's not something about forcing yourself to do this or doing meditation or renunciation. Actually, those things usually increase the ego, because if you force yourself to do lots of meditation, you may end up telling yourself the story that you are more spiritual than other people. Or if you renunciate stuff to be poor, let's say, you may feel you are more holy or you're more saint, you are more spiritual than other people. Removing ego is never about practice, is never about exercise, is never about effort, except the effort to do the introspection. But the key is to do the introspection. It's not that you have to do something. It's not about ongoing effort. Yes, there may be some effort to do the introspective process to ask the question why, but it's a one-off effort. That is, you do it once and then you're good. It's not an ongoing effort. So there is no need to do ongoing effort. Actually, ongoing effort usually produces more ego. Whereas the one-off effort, so you do the effort only once to do the introspection, you realize the root of the problem and you get rid of the story and you start to demolish your ego. And eventually, once you have removed all the ego stories, then you have no ego. It's not something fascinating or incredible that you need to be a monk and meditate for 50 years in a temple to remove your ego. Absolutely not. And by the way, those monks may have huge ego because they may just think they are more spiritual, they are more good, they are more holy, they deserve heaven more, blah, 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 blah. So those guys may have massive ego. Or not, you cannot know. But the point is, removing ego is about removing those stories that you tell yourself about your identity. And this is done through an introspective process, and the trick is to always ask the question why every single time you catch yourself believing that you have to do something, you should do something, you are this, you are not that, if this happened to you, it means that, blah, 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 blah.